President Obama takes a parting shot at President-elect Trump, saying he could have won the election if he had been able to run for a third term.
I'm confident that if I had run again and articulated it, I think I could have mobilized a majority of the American people to rally behind it.
Well, President-elect Trump fired back on Twitter. President Obama said that he thinks he would have won against me. He should say that, but I say no way. Jobs leaving, ISIS, Obamacare, etc. Well, Karl Rove is the former White House Deputy Chief of Staff for President George W. Bush and a Fox News contributor. Thanks for joining us.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
So Mr. Obama says, in conversations that I've had with people around the country, they say the direction that you point towards is the right one. That's what President Obama says he's hearing from people. But if that's the case, why wouldn't they have supported Mrs. Clinton?
Well, not only, the quote was even worse than what you said, because he said, I talked to people who didn't agree with me,
yes,
who are on the other side, and they said we were going in the right direction. I'd like to meet those people. Look, we don't know whether or not his assertion is accurate or not. I mean, first of all, he can't run again. He's limited to 2 terms. But there's an interesting number in the exit polls. I was intrigued by this interview that he gave with David Axelrod, and I went back and took a look at the exit polls. In 2012, 46% of the voters said the country was going in the right direction. They voted for Obama 93-7 over Mitt Romney. 52% said the country was going in the wrong direction. They voted 13% for President Obama and 89% for Mitt Romney. 2016, fast forward, the percentage of the people who say we're going in the right direction is down to 33%, down from 46, nearly half, to a third, and they voted for Hillary Clinton, those that said it was going in the right direction, 89-7 over Donald Trump. But nearly 2/3, approaching 2/3 of the people said the country was going in the wrong direction. They voted a quarter for Mrs. Clinton, and nearly 7 out of every 10 voted for Donald Trump. So I'm not certain that if I were President Obama, I'd be so glibly saying, oh, I would have won, particularly when you read the rest of the interview. He says, oh, we were doing great things for rural America, and they benefited from the Affordable Care Act, and we really did a lot of things for working class white voters. The economy was getting so much better. This is not how people perceived either the Affordable Care Act or the Obama economy, or really even the impact of all of his policies. He sort of thinks because we had a good ag policy through the ag secretary, Tom Vilsack, that meant that rural America should have been forced. Well, maybe rural America was worried not just about the farm bill, but also about how unsafe the world was, how the deficits were growing, and how the country seemed to be going in the wrong direction, and how we were having an economic recovery in which people were not seeing their paychecks grow.
Yeah, Mr. Obama also interestingly expressed concerns that we're moving into an era which, quote, in which we are looking for simple solutions. We shut ourselves off from different points of view, shutting down debate, becoming more dogmatic. Which party is he referring to there?
Yeah, this is really, I thought, one of the great ironic moments in the interview, because remember, in February of 2009, when the House Republicans come down to suggest changes to his infrastructure program, he cuts off Eric Cantor, the Republican deputized to lay out their suggestions, by saying, I won. Remember, later in the year, the Republicans on the Senate Finance Committee and the Democrats on the Senate Finance Committee began to have meetings to discuss a bipartisan approach to the health care bill. And the White House retaliates by saying that neither the White House nor Senate Democrats will be bound by any agreement arrived at by Senate Democrats and Senate Republicans on the committee through which the health care bill has to go. So, look, I love this. President Obama is sort of a revisionist, a very quick revisionist. Oh, I am the victim of people not understanding that I had complex solutions. They wanted simple ones. They opposed me right from the beginning. They didn't listen to me. When in reality, the opposite is just true. President Obama, right from the beginning, his problem was he had too many Democrats in the Senate, too many Democrats in the House, didn't feel he needed to rely upon Republican votes, and as a result, rammed through legislation on a straight party line vote, paying no attention whatsoever to the ideas or the interests of the minority. You cannot pass legislation and have it be durable. Look at Bush's tax cuts. Came into office far more contentious election in 2000, and yet in 2001, June of 2001, passed his tax cuts with a quarter of the Democrats in the Senate voting for it, and 10 years later, virtually 98% of the Bush tax cuts are validated with President Obama in office.
All right.
That's what bipartisanship allows you to do. President Obama governed in a highly partisan, negative fashion, and now is trying to sort of look back and say, well, I was the guy who was trying to get it done in a bipartisan way.
All right, Karl Rove, thank you so much.
You bet.
Well, President Obama today will tour the Pearl Harbor Memorial together with the Japanese Prime Minister. How this historic meeting marks a turning point in the relationship between the two nations. We will have a live report on this from Hawaii.
And new developments in that manhunt for 6 inmates who escaped from a county jail through the toilet.
It's kind of ingenious at taking the commode out and going through the sewer, as you'd say. Yeah, I've had it on my mind all day.
Tennessee authorities have recaptured 5 of 6 inmates after they escaped on Christmas by removing a toilet from the wall. The sheriff says that wall was weakened by recent repairs. So once the toilet was out of the way, they were able to break through.
They was able to kick out some concrete that was easily broken, along with some plumbing and some other things, and they kicked open a steel box unit that was covering the outside of the access.
The final inmate still on the lam is 54-year-old David Frazier, who is considered dangerous. Officials say they're doing everything possible to recapture him.
President Obama meeting today with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. The two leaders will tour the memorial that sits above the sunken USS Arizona in Pearl Harbor. The visit follows President Obama's historic visit to Hiroshima earlier this year. The parallel visits marking a milestone in the relationship between our country and Japan. Kevin Corke is traveling with the president in Hawaii and joins us live now from sacred Pearl Harbor. Hi, Kevin.
Yes, indeed, Eric, you're right. Sacred ground, a day of reflection and reconciliation, as I think you aptly point out, as the two leaders will meet here today at the USS Arizona Memorial, marking the occasion, 75 years since that fateful day at Pearl Harbor and the attacks that propelled the U.S. into World War II in the Pacific. We mentioned the memorial here. It is really quite a sight. If you haven't had a chance to come visit, it is a powerful reminder of man's inhumanity to man. Of course, the USS Arizona fell by the brutal attack that fateful morning that cost the lives of so many. It was December 7th, 1941, as President Roosevelt powerfully said, a date which will live in infamy, a day also marked by the sacrifice and heroism and loss of so many Americans. The visit by Abe, the back end actually of an earlier exchange at Hiroshima, as you said, when President Obama marked the end of the war and the lingering effects of the first atomic bomb blast there. I was there for that trip, a powerful visit indeed. As for the Japanese Prime Minister, well, this visit is as much about the past as it is the future between our two countries, and it's a promising one, says America's top diplomat to Japan.
I think the alliance is so strong and it has so much bipartisan support. I think President Trump, I think that he'll recognize that.
A joint news conference is set to come our way a little bit later today. It'll be very interesting to hear what the two leaders have to say about the future of our relations as we prepare for a new president, Eric. And of course, we'll be here and have all the details for you. But for now, back to you.
All right, Kevin, and we're told the Prime Minister will not be apologizing, but it certainly is seems to be some type of milestone. Thank you. Patty Ann?
Well, Eric, Iran is now thumbing its nose at American businesses. Tehran threatening to renege on a deal with Boeing, saying it will only pay half price. We'll have details on that coming up.
And you know, the tensions have been growing between the U.S. and Israel after that UN resolution against the Jewish state. Why Israel says the White House is behind the whole thing. First, though, here's Charles Krauthammer.
Does anybody think that Venezuela and New Zealand spent nights slaving over the wording of this resolution? They were the ones who introduced it. Of course not. This was a U.S. operation all the way.
Iran is now claiming it drove a hard bargain in a deal to buy 80 new Boeing jets. Iran's deputy transport minister saying his country will pay only half price. But it may not be such a great deal after all. Kristen Fisher is live in Washington. Kristen, is there more to this story?
Oh, there is, Patty Ann, because it's pretty common for customers buying in bulk from any aircraft manufacturer like Boeing or Airbus to get a very steep discount. And in fact, both of those companies signed massive contracts with Iran this month. Now, what is a little bit surprising is the fact that Iran is essentially bragging about it. On Sunday, Iran's deputy transport minister said that, quote, considering the nature of our order, the order with Boeing, and its choice possibilities, the purchase contract for 80 Boeing aircraft is worth about 50% of that amount. Now, the original terms were 80 airplanes for almost $17 billion. According to Iran, they've negotiated that price down to under $10 million. Again, not uncommon, especially during a time of downturns in orders for almost all major aircraft manufacturers. But the optics, at least on the surface, don't look good. Patty Ann.
How is Boeing responding?
Well, so far, Boeing hasn't commented. Remember, this was billed as the biggest business deal between an American company and Iran in almost 40 years, and it still could be. Iran's civil aviation fleet is badly outdated, and its replacement has always been one of the biggest economic opportunities of the Iran nuclear deal. In fact, this deal with Boeing was often cited by the White House as one of the reasons they were able to get Iran to the table.
How is it a good idea that an American company might want to sell the Iranians aircraft technology, for example, while they continue to fund a missile program that threatens not only our allies in the region, but indeed could threaten the United States?
I think this is a good example of how their desire to re-engage with the international community did give the United States and the international community leverage to get Iran to make a bunch of serious commitments as it relates to their nuclear program.
But Boeing's deal with Iran will likely encounter some turbulence once Mr. Trump takes office. He was against the Iran nuclear deal and the lifting of sanctions, which is the only reason that this deal with Boeing became possible. Patty Ann.
All right, Kristen Fisher live in Washington. Thank you.
Well, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu not backing down after blaming the United States for that controversial United Nations Security Council resolution condemning the continued construction of Israeli settlements in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. This, despite the White House denying responsibility. A syndicated columnist and Fox News contributor Charles Krautheimer had this view.
This is very serious damage, and it cannot be undone because you can't change Security Council resolution without the acquiescence of the Russians and the Chinese, and you're not going to get it.
Ken Abramovich joins us. He's a board member of Israel Independence Fund, the American Friends of Likud, Americans for a Safe Israel, and the Institute for the Study of Global Anti-Semitism and Policy. Also the founder of SaveTheWest.com. Ken, welcome. Do you think the White House was really behind this resolution?
Well, the White House was behind the resolution by definition because anyone working on the resolution would want to know if America's going to veto it or not, and would try to get America to agree to the wording. So America was either directly or indirectly involved by definition.
Well, the Israelis are saying, directly and very specifically, and they claim that they have specific evidence of this, and they will give this evidence, they say, over to the Trump administration when it takes office. Do you think that alleged evidence should be made public?
Well, it should be made public also by definition. People have the right to know. But when you have 14 other members of the UN Security Council, they're all talking to each other all the time, particularly on a resolution like this. So by definition, there was collusion between the 15 members.
One of the examples being cited is Secretary of State John Kerry meeting with the New Zealand foreign minister, and that was in the press in New Zealand last month, in that they were talking about a resolution. Let me read you what Bret Stephens in the Wall Street Journal this morning writes. Bret, Pulitzer Prize winner, of course, saying, quote, "The administration is likely being deceptive about last week's UN vote. It means the administration no longer bothers to lie convincingly. We have the spectacle of the U.S. government hiding behind the skirts of the foreign minister of New Zealand, along with the eminent co-sponsors Venezuela, Malaysia, and Senegal, in order to embarrass and endanger a democratic ally." And now, Ken, the World Jewish Congress is calling for hearings and investigation on Capitol Hill to find out what Ben Rhodes did, his alleged involvement, Samantha Power, the UN ambassador. Do you think there should be hearings and some type of an investigation, or would you just let this go?
So this is a big deal. There should be hearings on how this came about, but it's also part of a much bigger issue. In this example, the U.S. government is not acting in the interests of the U.S. government. And President Obama has a personal responsibility to protect our country and protect our national interests. This resolution goes against American national interests. That's the big scandal.
How does it do that? How does this resolution that affects Israel and the settlements go against American national interest, in your view?
Well, Western civilization's fighting for its life, and Israel's the eastern border of Western civilization. And the settlements, so-called settlements, are the eastern border of the eastern border of Western civilization, and basically save Western civilization from the three major worldwide terror organizations: Iran, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and the Muslim Brotherhood, or Hamas, as it's called in that area. So Israel's doing everybody a big favor by defending them from these terror organizations. Israel also defends Christians, Jews, and Muslims in Judea and Samaria, in Israel, and actually protects the so-called Palestinian Arabs.
Well, how about those who say, the settlements, as you know, are illegal under international law, and that Israel is just being provocative with the continued settlement building? I mean, the deputy mayor of Jerusalem is saying that they're going to start, permits for hundreds of more houses.
Right. All of those criticisms are just a false narrative. Jews have been living in Judea and Samaria for 3,800 years, ever since Abraham first declared that paganism was a false narrative. Jews have more rights to be in Judea and Samaria than Americans have to be in America. Americans only have been here 400 years, and New Zealand 175 years. How does a 400-year-old country tell a 3,800-year-old country where it should live? So the Palestinian Arabs have only been there 150 years.
I mean, finally and quickly, what would you say to the Palestinians, and what do you hope?
I would hope for the status quo, because I can't think of a better solution than the status quo. And I'd say to the Palestinians, you should thank God that Israel and the Israel Defense Forces protects them every day from the three worldwide terror organizations. Remember, the #1 victim of the three terror organizations are Muslims. And the Jews, Israel is protecting Muslims, Christians, and the whole region, and Europe and America and the world should be grateful. In a normal world, all the 15 members of the Security Council would have vetoed this resolution. It just shows how far we're away from a normal world.
Well, of course, the Palestinians would say it's the status quo for them means occupation. And that, of course, is the crux of this continued issue.
Yeah,
Ken Abramowitz,
it's just a false narrative.
Yep, Ken Abramowitz, thank you. Thank you for your views this morning.
You're welcome.
Of course. Patty Ann.
Well, Republicans on Capitol Hill are moving to crack down on disorderly conduct in the House. It's in response to a sit-in by Democrats that was broadcast live from the House floor last summer. Breaking House rules regarding video and photos would now bring a $500 fine for a first offense, $2,500 for additional violations. In-house cameras were switched off at the time of the protest over gun control. It was less than 2 weeks after the Pulse nightclub massacre in Orlando. But Democrats used social media to telecast the sit-in live.
Well, President-elect Trump facing some stiff opposition even before his administration takes office.
They have to answer and satisfy the American people about a whole lot of questions.
So are Democrats on Capitol Hill preparing to become the new party of no?
And a major development as Russia searches for clues in the crash of a military jetliner. Investigators hope the latest discovery will reveal what caused that jet to plunge into the Black Sea.
In the investigation into that Russian military plane crash over the weekend, crews have recovered one of the aircraft's black boxes. Authorities say the flight recorder does not appear to be seriously damaged, and they say it is already being examined. Overnight, divers found more pieces of that plane's fuselage and the engine. Russian investigators are focusing on pilot error or possible mechanical failure, and they have ruled out terrorism. But some experts say it is too early to know that for sure. Sadly, all 92 people on board are believed to have been killed.
Democrats are gearing up to fight the Trump agenda. They have plans to throw up roadblocks even before he takes office, possibly setting themselves up to become the new so-called Party of No. Leslie Marshall is a syndicated radio talk show host and Fox News contributor. Ed Martin is the president of the Eagle Forum Fund, former chair of the Missouri State GOP, and author of The Conservative Case for Trump. Thank you both for joining us.
Good morning.
So House Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi is calling for Democratic lawmakers to block Republican efforts to repeal and replace Obamacare. And we're hearing other Democrats urging politicians to block the Trump administration at every turn. Leslie, didn't Democrats criticize Republicans repeatedly for blocking the Obama agenda?
Absolutely, and we see this happen on both sides every time there is a regime change, if you will, and a party change. But the difference here is that Democrats have, I believe, as a Democrat, a responsibility not only to their constituents, which were the technical majority of voters, and also to the United States to properly vet cabinet members. And with regard to Obamacare, even top insurance companies sent a letter to congressional members and said, please don't do this unless you have a replacement plan, because millions will be left without proper coverage. So this isn't just being a party of no, this is being a party, I believe, of what's best for the American people.
Well, they are working on a replacement plan, and they have a long timeline for that actual repeal and replacement. But Ed, we're going to talk more about nominees in a minute, but when it comes to blocking legislation, who do you expect to be the pit bulls in the efforts to block the Trump agenda?
Well, the interesting question is we're starting to see fractures already in the party of no. I mean, when Schumer comes out and says about the betrayal of Israel that he was upset about it, you start to see tension, and Obama then gets to the podium and says, I would have won the race, I'm still important. Look, out here in the heartland, and I think across the country, Trump is a transformational leader. He's attracting Democrats and independents, and now that he's won, you're seeing his numbers go up. He's saying, not the old playbook from even the Republicans, but a new playbook. And I think the Democrats, you know, Schumer, whoever it will be, Pelosi, that just sounds like the old guard. And I think you're going to see it's not going to work. It's actually going to be a losing strategy. And you're hearing Biden, of all people, the oldest of the old guard, is saying we need a real playbook, not just the old say no. So it's exciting to watch as a Republican or a conservative to see the fissures, but we have so much work to do. It's not, I don't think it's going to amount to much. I think we got to keep going forward.
Speaking of Chuck Schumer, he is the Senate Minority Leader incoming, and there is this talk of blocking Mr. Trump's nominees for cabinet posts, etc. And here's what Mr. Schumer said about that. He said the Democrats aren't planning to block, they just want to do extreme vetting. Let's listen.
For any of these nominees, I think the watchword is a thorough vetting. Don't say absolutely not, but they have to answer and satisfy the American people about a whole lot of questions.
Well, Leslie, again, haven't Democrats complained about tough vetting of the Democratic president's nominees?
Well, to your point, absolutely. But I have to say that going forward, and especially in light of the outcome of this election, it's clear that the American people want change. And I think this is part of the change, and I think it's a very good change. And when you look at one of his cabinet picks, for example, Tillerson, and you've done so much business with foreign governments, I feel that with a party like Republicans who want transparency, as do Democrats and certainly the American people, I think it's in the best interest of the United States. They can't block with their votes, their numbers. I mean, they're for short in the Senate with a Republican majority. But I think they have to do their due diligence when you have not just wealthy people, but especially somebody who did work with foreign governments for ExxonMobil. And what was his dealing with that? That could be a conflict of interest. And I think before anybody votes left or right, they need to be educated across the board, whether it comes to ethics, foreign government relations, their tax returns, and certainly a background check by the FBI. I don't think these are unreasonable requests the Democrats are making for these candidates.
Absolutely. Extreme vetting. You know, we want to know who we're getting. Mr. Trump's incoming White House press secretary, Sean Spicer, said today that Mr. Trump has 17 million Twitter followers. He calls that a direct pipeline to the American people. Combined with Facebook and Instagram, it's well over 40 million. Ed, are we going to see these legislative battles move? You know, we've always had C-SPAN. We've had it for quite some time. But is it going to be more public this year because of things like social media?
I don't think there's any doubt that everything about the government is going to be more public. I mean, Donald Trump, again, transformational candidate, transformational leader. He's going to use Twitter as a call and response. He's going to put out what he thinks, and he's going to react to the responses. I think this is actually incredibly exciting because people are going to get a say in real time. For example, last week when he talked about the nuclear arms question, he put out a strong statement. The reaction around the world framed the debate, and it framed the debate the way we want it, which is America wants to always be militarily superior to the other side. So look, when it comes to confirmations, I think you're right. Let's have transparency. All these candidates are going to go through a Senate, and it's going to be great. We're going to see what their background is. Some of them may have problems. But here's the news the public needs to know. Math is still math. It's 52-48 and plus Mike Pence. So if Harry Reid gutted the filibuster a few years ago on judges and everything else, and we're going to see the Republicans are going to say, hey, give this guy his administration and let's judge him on how he does it, I think Americans will be excited about that. It'll work out well.
All right, we will see. Ed Martin, Leslie Marshall, thank you both so much for joining us.
Thank you, Patty Ann.
Well, you know, Patty Ann, it was the fiesta of the year. Thousands of people from all over the world showing up at a teenager's birthday after that invitation, well, it went viral. How this amazing thing all went down.
Everybody will be dancing tonight. Shuts down one of his charities, but will it stop the critics? That's coming up on Happening Now, plus the Republican plans to change the safety net in this country. Will it be as drastic as some Democrats are warning? And another plane crash in Russia as part of a fleet of Russian planes gets grounded. What's going on in Russian aviation and what lessons could it hold for America? That's coming up in 7 minutes. Happening Now.
President-elect Trump has an ambitious action plan for his first 100 days in office. On that to-do list, affordable child care and elder care legislation. Alicia Acuna joins us live from Denver, and some experts are saying that this plan could come with a hefty price tag, right?
Up to $1 trillion over 10 years, Patty Ann. That's according to the Tax Foundation, which is nonpartisan. President-elect Trump says our federal tax policies need to come in line with the realities of today's families. So for child care, for instance, he wants mothers who don't already get paid leave from employers to receive 6 weeks guaranteed maternity leave. Parents will be offered dependent care savings accounts that roll over year to year. Those under a certain income ceiling could deduct child care expenses up to a certain amount. This includes stay-at-home parents. And for low-income families, the government would provide rebates through the Earned Income Tax Credit. Now, in Nevada, which ranks 47th for child well-being, according to researchers at University of Nevada, Las Vegas, single mom Sarah O'Grady says she's hopeful for possible changes, but right now she gets help from family and friends while on a wait list for assisted child care and considering a second job.
I already feel like I don't see my kids enough, but I mean, it's coming down to being able to afford what they need, and, I can't be greedy with my time if I need to make sure that they're okay and taken care of.
In Nevada and many other states, Patty Ann, sending your kid to child care is more expensive than sending them to college. Patty Ann?
Yeah, and it's not just child care, it's elder care as well.
That's right, seemingly insurmountable costs, which Trump says he wants to address. So for elder care, he wants dependent care savings accounts as well, and is proposing a pre-tax deduction limited to $5,000 per year. Karen Brown, seen here with her mom, left a lucrative career to care for her aging relatives. Her mother's substantial nest egg was busted by the round-the-clock care after a stroke.
We do have the Medicaid program, which helps really sort of the poorest of the poor. There's a huge gap of the people who are beyond the poorest of the poor to those people who are considered wealthy that have no resource whatsoever.
And even with money, quality caregivers for the elderly, Patty Ann, are pretty hard to come by. Patty Ann.
Yeah. All right, Alicia Acuna, thanks.
Well, Republicans have a massive plan, they say, to overhaul the tax code. So how would it really work under the Trump administration?
So get this, an estimated 10,000 people showed up for a Mexican teen's 15th birthday near Mexico City after her father's invitation went viral. This was the scene at Ruby Ibarra's quinceañera. It's a sweet 15 party of sorts, and it turned into the party of the year after a local photographer posted a video of her dad inviting everyone on Facebook. It ended up on YouTube. There were musical tributes, jokes, even company sponsorships. A Mexican airline even offered a discount on flights there with the slogan, "Are you going to Ruby's party?" Ruby appeared to be overwhelmed at times, but boy, did she look beautiful in her fuchsia dress and tiara. Happy birthday to Ruby.
Oh, Ruby, happy birthday. 10,000 people. That's unbelievable.
That
Wow.
sounds like a parent's nightmare to have an invitation go that
Yes,
far.
when you have a teenage daughter, exactly.
Yeah. Well, it looks like they had fun, so you're back again tomorrow.
Yes, I am. Sorry you won't be here, but it's good to have you.
Great to see you, and great to see everyone at home as well.
I'll be back tomorrow, but now, Happening Now starts now.